Hey everyone, I'm Justin, and I'm just in it for the justice. I've wanted to start a YouTube channel for a long time with some political commentary and hopefully laughs along the way to keep from crying too much. And when I woke up to today's events, I finally felt inspired to do so. So I'm going to make it happen. Bernie Sanders announced his run for president in 2020 today. And this is very exciting news to me because Bernie is the guy who got me involved in politics at all in the first place. I was cruising through my early 20s thinking that everything going on in Washington, D.C., even local political offices, was something for the other to deal with, and I couldn't really be concerned with it more than I could sports, lots of sports, and rock music, concerts, cool. Still into these things? Not nearly as much. Holy crap, politics is important. Which is why I was so upset to see the second thing that I woke up to this morning, and that was a CNN smear piece on Bernie Sanders just hours after he had made his official announcement for president. I can't say that I am surprised that CNN had something locked and loaded to tear down Bernie from the start of his campaign, but even I'm disappointed in the low effort, the poor quality of the piece from Chris Kozila, editor-at-large at CNN. And so before I ramble too long, I'd like to just get to the article and read that for you, and I will offer my thoughts along the way. I will link to this article in the video description, but I guess that's my Freudian way of remembering to ask you to subscribe, because I've got nobody yet. This is video number 1. Please join me and see what can happen in the future. Won't it be exciting? Alright, let's get to the article. 5 reasons to be skeptical of Bernie Sanders' 2020 bid. Ooh. Bernie Sanders made it official on Tuesday morning. He's running for president again. Quote, I am asking you to join me today as part of an unprecedented and historic grassroots campaign that will begin with at least 1 million people from across the country. End quote. That is Sanders wrote in an email to supporters, codifying a long-expected candidacy that will aim to bottle the same grassroots energy and money that he built during a surprisingly strong and successful 2016 race against former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. While most polling suggests Sanders begins the contest in a strong second place behind only former Vice President Joe Biden, who has yet to announce his bid, there are a number of questions surrounding Sanders and his campaign that he will have to answer between now and the first 2020 votes next February. Here are the 5 that matter most. Number 1. How will he handle the expectations of being in the top tier? Sanders started the 2016 campaign as a sideshow. He was regarded as a wacky lefty with some radical ideas about the country. From his push for single-payer health insurance to his ideas about free college tuition. He drew comparisons to the Democratic version of Ron Paul. Nice guy, wild ideas, not to be taken terribly seriously. From that starting point, Sanders had nowhere to go but up, and up he went, developing into not only a legitimate challenger to Clinton, but also a voice for the rising liberal base in the party. In 2020, Sanders won't benefit from those low expectations. Okay, I'm going to stop it right here. Your number 1 most important reason to be skeptical of Bernie Sanders for president is because people have high expectations for him? Yep, you really want what's best for the masses, the working class, the 99% in America, don't you, CNN? That makes a lot of sense that, we better be skeptical of the guy who has popular ideas that have been co-opted by more establishment Democrats. Let us continue. He may not be the front runner in the race, but he absolutely, if polling is to be believed, starts in the top tier. No, really. You just said that he was number 2 to Biden, who hasn't even announced his run. So yeah, He's in the top tier. Thank you, Chris. Sanders has never been a front-runner sort of guy, so this will be all new to him. Oh, except for election after election after election after election after election that he's won to retain his Senate seat in Vermont. But let's go on. He will no longer get credit for leaping over low expectations. In fact, he is much more likely to struggle with high expectations. What happens, for instance, if polling this fall shows Sanders in 6th place in Iowa or 3rd place in New Hampshire? How does he and his campaign react to that? Well, let me answer your questions for you, Chris. He will react to that by educating the public on how ridiculous of a primary system we have, especially in the Democratic Party. It's one that absolutely screwed him over in 2016, thanks to superdelegates. And supposedly, through the Democratic Reform Committee, I don't know if I'm getting the name right there, the Reform Committee that was put together where Senator Sanders got to assign 8 people to be on the committee to reform the primary process. Well, they came to the wonderful decision that superdelegates would be wiped away for the first ballot in the primary. However, if it goes to a second ballot, superdelegates are right back in play. Those people who absolutely run over the idea of one person, one vote, because they are a superdelegate and they get to make that decision for thousands of people. Why? Because they're friends of the establishment. Yeah, maybe if Bernie doesn't do great at the beginning of the primary, he can talk about all this. Let's move on, because there are 4 more flimsy reasons why you might be skeptical of Sanders' 2020 run. Here's number 2. How will he withstand more scrutiny and more attacks? Well, probably with facts and policy. But let's read on. One of the secrets to Sanders' success in 2016 was that no one, most especially Clinton, thought he had any chance of going anywhere in the race. Clinton largely ignored him for the better part of 2015, allowing some problematic parts of Sanders' record for Democrats, most notably his voting record on guns, to go unnoticed. I'm not even going to get into this one. You could just look up the ratings. Bernie has like a D- rating from the NRA on guns. So that should tell you all you need to know about Sanders' policy on guns. But if you want to know more, he has facts and policy out there, and he votes consistently, and you can check his record. Let's go back. We have a parenthetical. When the race began to tighten, Clinton gently prodded Sanders on guns and healthcare. Sanders, too, largely flew under the radar of investigative reporters for major news outlets who were busy looking into Clinton, Jeb Bush, Marco Rubio, and others seen as more viable candidates. That reality clearly benefited Donald Trump in the early days of his campaign as well. Are you kidding me? The microscope investigative journalism wasn't interested in Donald Trump in the early part of his campaign? There was nothing but Donald Trump's name and face all over the 24-hour news cycle from the word go. We all remember that escalator ride. Yeah, this is just outright falsehood from Mr. Chris Kozilla. Yeah, video number 1. I'm calling you out, Chris. You'll never see this, and I hope that very few people see this article. But that's not the way that Google's algorithms work, because it's the first one to pop up when any excited voter is going to look up Bernie Sanders announces for 2020. So why don't we continue and see what else is wrong with this piece? Sanders will get no pass from either the media or his fellow candidates this time around. He is among the frontrunners and will be treated as such. Yeah, we discussed that. His wife's time as president of Burlington College could well come up. Well, you already brought it up with a link to an article that is again going to be entrenched in falsehood. But let's move on, because as you say, people are going to be bringing that up for the next 2 years. And his opponents will do a deep dive into his nearly 30 years of votes as a member of the House and Senate. This is all very normal stuff in a campaign, but not for Sanders. Go ahead, dig through his record and his votes. The reason that I am interested in Bernie Sanders is because he says what he means, and he votes that way, consistently. And if new information comes to him that causes him to reconsider his views, he's open to that, and then will vote in an according fashion. Number 3 reason to be skeptical of Bernie Sanders' 2020 run. Does it matter that he's not really a Democrat? For his entire political life prior to the 2016 presidential race, Sanders ran and won as an independent and identified himself as a democratic socialist. He changed his affiliation to Democrat during the 2016 election as, in truth, a political necessity, since running as an independent for president held little chance of him winning. But as soon as his 2016 campaign ended, Sanders switched back to being an independent and ran as one for re-election to the Senate in 2018. Yes, I know that Sanders has always caucused with Democrats in the House and Senate, and that his policies quite clearly line up with the policy prescriptions of the Democratic Party. But if that's all true, then why does Sanders feel the need to be an independent and describe himself as a democratic socialist? And in a field which there will be lots and lots and lots, that last one's in parentheses. Chris really likes his parentheses in this article, of options for liberal voters, will they really choose someone who has spent almost his entire adult life as something other than a Democrat? Well, Chris, if he's offering them the health care they need, and the college education they need, and the tax policies they need, and the living wage that they need, like he's been stumping on for decades, yeah, I think there's a pretty good chance that they will ignore the fact that in his senatorial position, he's got an I next to his name instead of a D. Number 4, does he have a second act? Does he need one? No, he doesn't need one. He's got the policy, remember? There is zero question that Sanders has already had a profound impact on the Democratic Party, even if he's not technically been a Democrat all that time. Where have we discussed this except in point number 3 of this article? In 2016, Clinton laughed at Sanders' Medicare for All proposal. Now it is the default position of the 2020 frontrunners, with only Biden resistant to endorsing it. Oh yeah, that guy who you said was the frontrunner doesn't support Medicare for All, which the majority of the country, over 60% of the country, is in favor of. Over 50% of Republicans are in favor of. But let's continue. But Sanders won't have the liberal lane to himself in this race like he did in 2016. Good. I hope he's not in the liberal lane. He will be squarely in the progressive lane with Tulsi Gabbard, my other favorite candidate, and I would love to see if one of them backs out from this race. I would love to see a Bernie-Tulsi ticket or a Tulsi-Bernie ticket, which I'll talk more about in point number 5, coming up soon. So, yeah, Sanders won't have the liberal lane to himself like he did in 2016. Oh, you mean when literally no one ran for president except him, Clinton, and 2 cardboard cutouts? Okay. In fact, the liberal lane is stuffed full of candidates, all of whom sound a hell of a lot like Bernie Sanders on policy. More parentheses, this is not an accident. Can Sanders win on a, well, yeah, but I was here first argument? Or does he need something more? Something beyond the ideas that energized his 2016 campaign? In interviews setting up his second candidacy, Sanders sounds exactly like he did in 2016. Quote, "Our campaign is about transforming our country and creating a government based on the principles of economic, social, racial, and environmental justice," he said on Tuesday. Is that enough for voters with a lot more choices this time around? It's enough for me. I'm just in it for the justice, remember? Political justice, economic justice, social justice, consistent policies from 3 or 4 years ago. Yeah, that sounds good to me. Sorry if that doesn't tickle your fancy, Chris. Let's get to the ever-important point number 5, why you should be skeptical of Bernie Sanders' run. Does the Democratic Party want a 77-year-old white male as its nominee? Oh, in the 2018 midterm elections, the increasing diversity of the Democratic Party was on full display. from the bevy of women elected to the House to the history-making victories for 2 Muslim women and 2 Native American women, to the candidacies of people like Stacey Abrams and Andrew Gillum. The message was clear. The Democratic Party's base is getting more female, more liberal, less white, and younger. So that means that there are no white people allowed in the Democratic Party to run for office anymore? No men allowed to run for office anymore? No liberals, as you call them? No, or progressive would be maybe a better term? You can't be old, you can't be white, and you can't be a man. Go home. Don't run for president. It's over. Well, unless you're Joe Biden. Let's keep reading. Aside from the more liberal thing, Sanders doesn't fit any of those categories. At 77, he will be the oldest candidate in the field on either side. More parentheses, Biden is 76. But that's not a problem. That's not a problem. The guy was born less than 12 months after Bernie Sanders, has already spent 8 years in a White House, which everyone always talks about, the aging process the president goes through. You don't think the vice president undergoes a little bit extra stress and maybe some factors of aging during 8 years in the White House? So Sanders 77, Biden 76, but has been in the White House 8 years. Nah, don't worry about Biden's age. Bernie, though, he could keel over at any moment, and what would we do then? Well, hopefully have Tulsi Gabbard take over as the first female president, if she was his vice. Let's see how Chris finishes. Sanders simply doesn't look like the Democratic Party that scored across-the-board victories in 2018. What he does look like, demographically speaking, is the current occupant of the White House. Do Democrats want to nominate an older white man to run against an older white man in 2020? I don't see that as a problem. In fact, if we're using Occam's razor here, that even reduces our number of variables. The people who will vote in a general election based on gender, age, race. That's been eliminated. Now you have Bernie Sanders' policies versus Donald Trump's policies. Do I really need to go on? I will bet the house that I will never be able to afford as a young American, but if I could buy a house, I would bet that house on Bernie Sanders versus Donald Trump in a one-on-one general election in 2020. I have a lot more thoughts on this, but I'm going to keep it succinct for my first video because I feel like already this has taken a little while, and I don't want to just ramble forever. I want you to tune in to my future videos. You can do that by clicking on that subscribe button. Also, I'd appreciate if you would like and share this video. See, I've learned from all the other YouTubers. I gotta work these in. Should have had them at the top. I'll have them at the top next time, maybe. We'll see. I've been Justin. I'm just in it for the justice. I'll see you next time.